人間の寿命は短いって分かっていたのに、なんでもっと知ろうと思わなかったんだろう。
What would you do if you could live for 1,000 years? Some people answering surveys online say they'd explore the entire world. Others say they'd learn as much as possible about the science of the world. Me, however, I would probably try and master as many talents as possible so I could become super rich and have my own mega corporation. Or something like that. I haven't really put that much thought into it. But you might be thinking, why did I just ask that? Well, the reason I have just asked that is because I have just finished the first season of a new anime called Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and I can't quite get it off my mind because I think it is the best first season of an anime that I have seen in quite a while. Let me break it down for you. Have you ever gone on Crunchyroll and gone onto the fantasy tab and it's just a boring isekai after another boring isekai after Mushoku Tensei after another boring isekai? Well, that's because everything in the fantasy tab tends to be the same old story and world and characters as the others. The only difference being it has a fresh coat of paint.
That'll do it.
Frieren, on the other hand, has the same tropes as any of these other fantasy anime. For instance, the Demon King. But it doesn't do it in the same way that they do, making the idea still feel fresh and original. For instance, with the Demon King that I just mentioned, he is actually not in the story at all, and he's actually already dead, with the only mention of him being in passing. The reason this is so important is because the fantasy genre tends to be incredibly repetitive, but for Frieren to use the exact same tropes in a new way makes it feel like such a breath of fresh air. This isn't the only selling point for Frieren. The biggest one is the fact that the main story is already finished. It takes place around 80 years after the killing of the Demon King, where the party of heroes have already saved the world and gone on their big adventure. Instead, it follows the story of Frieren, an elf who was in the party of heroes that killed the Demon King. The reason it focuses on her is because elves can live more than 1,000 years, meaning that the journey she went on wasn't even a 100th of her lifetime. This means that she only saw it as a mere 10 years, whereas the other three members of the heroes party saw it as a massive part of their lifetime. This causes Frieren to be distant and almost emotionless about her time in the party of heroes. She keeps this mindset even when they return to the capital and celebrate killing the Demon King. We see in episode 1 that she does have this mindset even when everybody else is reflecting on their time together. And whilst they're reflecting on their time together, they make plans to go on one final adventure in 50 years when the next meteor shower occurs. And Frieren reluctantly agrees. Frieren doesn't change during the 50 years. In fact, we don't actually see what happens during the 50 years. One second Frieren is in a shop buying ingredients, and the next she's in the same shop, but the owner is suddenly 50 years older. Frieren then goes back, and we see the hero, the main guy, the one who is usually the main character in these sort of shows, Himmel. But he's now some decrepit old man who you can't even tell is the same person. After this moment, the rest of the heroes' party arrives, and they go on one final adventure to go and see the meteor shower they promised to witness together all those years ago. The next thing to follow is Himmel's passing. He has a massive funeral where loads of people come to pay their regards, including Frieren and the two other remaining members of the hero's party. This is the part where Frieren starts to show emotion. the part where she starts to break down
旅
and
しただ
cry.
けだし、人
break down
旅
and
しただ
cry.
けだし、人間の寿命は短いって分かっていたのに、なんでもっと知ろうと思わなかったんだろう。
She isn't inherently crying because of Himmel's passing. Instead, she is actually crying because she feels regret for not trying to get to know Himmel whilst she still had the chance to. Because now, she'll never get that chance again. This is where the main story starts, because up until now was the prologue. It was only there to set up the narrative of the story. The narrative being that Frieren herself doesn't actually understand why Himmel's death was so impactful that she cried. So she starts to go on a journey to figure that out. On her journey, she meets up with the priest from the hero's party, Haita, who has taken in an orphan girl named Fern.
フリーレン、なぜ私のところへ？
生徒への買い出しのついでだよ。旅先で会う人とはなるべく関わるようにしているからね。それにハイターにはたくさん借りがあるから、死なれる前に返しに来た。
では一つ頼み事を。
ん？
弟子を取りませんか？フェルンには魔法使いとしての素質があります。あなたの旅に連れて行ってくれませんか？
ごめんハイター、それだけはできない。
そうですか。では別の頼みを。
Haita asks Frieren to take Fern on as an apprentice, but Frieren says no because she doesn't want Fern to go into battle and pass away because a friend asked her to take care of her. So, Haita tells Frieren he has an old grimoire, which is a magic book, and asks her to decipher it since he thinks it can make him come back to life after he has passed away.
死者の蘇生も不死の魔法も書かれていなかったよ。
そうですか。
知っていたの？
死への恐怖は計り知れないものです。そんなものがあるならエイビヒ自身が使っていたでしょう。フェルンはどうなりましたか？
まだ荒いところはあるけど、一人前といっても遜色のないレベルだよ。
そうですか。間に合いましたか。
ん？
もう足手まといではありませんね、フリーレン。
お、測ったなハイタ
ー。フリーレン、フェルンを頼みましたよ。
This, however, is a lie, and in actual fact, he used it to buy time for Fern to learn magic so that Frieren doesn't have an excuse to not take her along. Haita then passes away. So Frieren and Fern say their goodbyes, and then they go on their journey. On their journey, Frieren and Fern find out about Aureale, a place in the Northern Lands which people refer to as Heaven. It is there where Himmel's soul rests. This becomes the main goal of the story, since it gives Frieren herself a goal, to speak to Himmel and give him a proper goodbye. This is when Frieren and Fern go on an adventure through the world that they live in. We see many different towns, people, locations, and even types of magic along the way. And the special thing about all of it is that everything feels so real. Each character and place is so carefully created so that the story feels as grounded as possible. The reason that this is so important is because in grounded anime, they sometimes make characters very over the top and unrealistic, which takes away from the feel of the show and can negatively impact the viewer's enjoyment in some ways. For instance, one of the main three characters in the show who Frieren and Fern meet along their journey is Stark. He is the fighter of the group and he uses an axe as his weapon. However, even though he is incredibly well trained and knows what he is doing, he still has fear when going into a fight because at the end of the day, he's putting his life at risk. This, like I said, only makes the story that much more grounded because even when people know what they're doing, they still have that fear of letting someone or themselves down. This show uses many different ways to make characters just as grounded and realistic as Stark, and in doing this it shows one of the messages behind Frieren, that is the dedication that people have towards their goals and aspirations. For instance, it shows an elderly man named Denken who wants to go to the northern lands and see his wife's grave.
ここまで来れたのはお前たちのおかげだ。これで故郷に墓参りに行ける。
そう。
But to do that, he has to become a first-class mage. He has to fight, he has to form alliances, and on top of that, he has to persevere through the hardest challenges he's ever faced. And like I said, he does all of this so he can achieve the goal of seeing his wife again, not to become some big famous mage and make a lot of money. Speaking of goals, I would like to once again talk about the goal of Frieren. Like I said, she wants to go and see Himmel one last time to give him a proper goodbye. Frieren has lived for many years and never put any effort into making friends or getting to know people, when realistically she has more time than anyone to get to know people. This is something we ourselves can't relate to, because not only can we not talk to dead people, but we also don't live even a tenth of the life that Frieren can live. But because of this, it makes Frieren's story that much more impactful. If Frieren has gone through her life and regrets not getting to know people or surround herself with people she loves like family, then we should too, because at the end of the day, our lifespan is shorter. So if we realize it sometime in our lives, unlike Frieren, it might be too late. But anyway, that's enough of me talking about the messages and meaning behind the story, since I feel it would be better for you to discover it yourself instead of me telling you about it. So I'm going to direct your attention to the animation for this anime. Because when I say it has amazing animation, I mean it has amazing animation. But you're not going to believe me unless I show you, so take a look at this. Crazy, right? This anime is a slow burn, and is more of an anime that makes you think about the messages than it being one about generic fighting. But even though that's the case, the animators decided to flex on everyone by giving us fights on the level of Jujutsu Kaisen or other big-named anime. This series could have been a PowerPoint slide type of anime like The Way of the House Husband, and I would have enjoyed it just as much. But Madhouse instead decided they were going to put as much effort into the fights and animation of this anime that they did for One Punch Man Season 1. And I'm glad they did, because they made it a goddamn masterpiece. And if that itself doesn't convince you enough to watch this anime, here are some examples of more things that this anime does so well. The first one is the love subplot between Fern and Stark.
何
ちっさ。
Both start off not liking each other at all, but as the story goes on, they start to get more and more comfortable with each other. And eventually it leads to a choreographed dance routine that they do together in front of a bunch of people. This is something that isn't usually done well in anime, because usually we get something like Hinata and Naruto, where there is no previous hinting of there being a relationship between the two, and then all of a sudden they're on a moon fighting some evil guy with the power of love. The second point I want to go over is the magic system, which is pretty in depth considering what it is. We are told who can use what type of magic, what spells are for demons or different races.
お前を殺す者がいるとすれば、それは魔王か。人間の魔法使いだ。
And how magic has changed over Frieren's lifetime. My third point is the soundtrack. There is no way for me to really explain this in a way without outright playing the music. But trust me, when you watch this anime, you will be well aware of how hard the soundtrack hits when it's supposed to hit, and how it adds so much immersion to the anime as a whole. Once again proving that Evan Cole is an incredibly good composer. There are so many other reasons to watch this show. but I can't list them all because I think I would be here for hours, and that's not even talking about the spoilery reasons of why you should watch the show. With that being said, now that season 1 has ended, I will definitely be going and reading the manga once I've finished making this video, and I personally think if you enjoyed the anime as much as me, then you should too. However, if you haven't watched the anime, then what are you doing? Get off this video, after you've liked and commented of course, go on Crunchyroll and watch it right now!